Big fucking day over here. Let's go. We got a tribal training zone calculator available here for the world to use and learn from. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact bike and run tests that I use for athletes. Going to map those to setting your bike power and run pace zones as well as your heart rate zones across both bike and run. And I'm also going to check in on an athlete that did a recent threshold test on the bike and show you how all this information is also inside of Training Peaks on the back end. But what I really was finding is that even though all that information is in there, athletes would really benefit from having a better understanding of how all this information flows together, how the tests map to the zones, and then how the zones map to the training. And just putting this all together would just help athletes develop, help them execute better in their training, get faster, get more fit, see more progress. And so that is why we are here. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to execute on bike and run tests, how those map out to your zones, and then how to execute on training from there. This is basically the foundation of all endurance development, and I am stoked to be doing it, so let's fucking go. All right, so first things first here, we are going to start with the bike threshold test and run threshold test that I prescribe to athletes. There are a variety of other tests that we can do, but these are like the bread and butters on how to set your threshold efforts. That's basically the idea. Threshold is basically what you can sustain for 1 hour, and we do some shorter tests based off of that then calculate what that expectation is for 1 hour effort, and then all zones are built off of that. So that's really what's going on here. Now, I've got the exact screen grab of the training sessions that I give athletes from inside of Training Peaks. You can read through the description if you'd like. The general idea here is that both this bike threshold test and this run threshold test, these are 30-minute, all-out, steady, no-stop efforts. And we are going to use those numbers, those power numbers, those pace numbers, to then map out to full threshold numbers and set zones from there. So that's really the idea. In both these sessions, we have good warm-ups. We want to get a couple of power surges on the bike, do a couple of strides on the run, let your heart rate rise and fall, let your body ramp up, and then when you are ready to go, you get right into 30 minutes, steady, all out, no stops, no watch pauses, boom. That's really the idea. Now, I will say, it's hard to do these tests. These tests are exhausting. They're challenging to execute. And so if you are a beginner, don't put a lot of pressure on these needing to be perfect. You will get better at testing over time. You will get better at pushing yourself over time. But listen, dog, we got to start somewhere. So let's go. Let it rip. All right, let's get into bike threshold. So the main metric that we want to find for the bike is your FTP. Functional threshold power, which again is the idea of what can you sustain for a full hour, absolute best effort. We do a 30-minute test, and we take that 30-minute peak average and we multiply it by 0.95. The idea is that that's 95%. So you take a 5% kind of cut off of what the expectation would be for an hour. We say that's good enough to figure it out, and we use that to set all zones. So I will get back to the run in a second, but let's just follow through the process here on the bike. So we do a bike test. Let's click into the calculator, and let's just say, hey, we got a bike FTP of 250, right? So I'm not going to do public math, but maybe you average 265 or something like that for the 30 minutes. You multiply it by 0.95, and you get 250. Boom. Now, 250 is plugging into this calculator that is setting all power zones. Let's just double check that this is working well. Let's say FTP was 300. Boom. Calculator's working. Let's go. And so with this, we want to be able to like leverage and reference heart rate, but bike power is a very true metric of just physical output. And so when somebody has these zone sets, these power zones should be able to hold you accountable to executing on training the way that we want to develop, right? So zone 2 rides, You know, we shouldn't be slogging away at zone 2 riding at 100 power just because it's easy. Like, we want to be locked in within this frame of zone. And then all of a sudden we got intervals prescribed and we want to be able to execute and perform, right? Whether we got zone 4, zone 5 intervals, whatever we're doing, we want to target those specific ranges of power. And bike power zones, I like to use this Andy Coggan profile. That's just basically what these percentages are. Lots of other kind of zone calculators will blend in with that, but I just really like his. It's very simple, 5 zones, boom, lock it in and get it done. Now, let's check in on run pacing before we get over to heart rate. How about that? So, run threshold test, again, same idea, 30 minutes, all out, nonstop, steady, no watch pauses, best sustainable effort. First minute is as strong as the last. Try not to fade out, right? Execute that, and then you pull the 30-minute average pace. And again, we want to map to really, we want the number of what we can expect to hold for an hour. But 30-minute test is just way simpler to execute on. And so what I like to do is add 20 seconds per mile to whatever your pace was for the 30 minutes. Now, every athlete's a little bit different. I'll give you an example for me. I did a run threshold test back in December, and I ran 6:36 per minute mile pacing for the 30-minute segment, and I set my threshold pace at 7 minutes a mile. So I added 24 seconds. A little bit conservative, totally fine. But again, the expectation is I ran 6:36 all out for 30 minutes. I'm not going to be able to run that all out for an hour and double it, right? So we will add a little bit of padding there to really calculate this out. Now, when we go to this, I got my 7 minutes plugged in here, and you can see exactly how that builds out the 5-zone profile. The run pace zones that I use, these are based off of Joel Friel's power profile, pace profile. And what I would mention here is that this gives an athlete a frame of just where to execute. And what I will guard you against is just because this zone 2 says that it's basically 8 to 9 minutes, like, that doesn't mean that every zone 2 run should be 8:05. Like, as long as you are comfortable within that zone, like, I have no problem seeing 8:30s, seeing 8:45s. I'm running with the dog. My zone 2 is getting better and better, so I don't really see 9 very often anymore. But just a year or 2 years ago, I was seeing 9 all the time. And so don't be too eager on kind of riding that line of the top end of zone 2. We still want that to just be like kind of steady within that zone profile. And then we want to focus a lot on executing well when we've got zone 4, zone 5 intervals. You got 30-30 runs, you got a track run. Like, we want to be able to hit those pacings, recover well, execute very steady, keep it going, boom. Now, let's get to heart rate. And we ultimately, let me share my heart rate philosophy here. So heart rate training is huge, it's great, it's valuable, and we want to basically observe heart rate in relation to bike power and run pacing. That's pretty much the idea. And we want it to be able to map out and say, okay, well, I'll explain these zones in a second, but it's like, all right, we got, bike heart rate in zone 2 for a zone 2 ride, and bike power is in zone 2 for a zone 2 ride. That's a good sign that our body is healthy, we're recovered. What would be kind of a red flag is if your bike power is in zone 2, but you're seeing your bike heart rate up in zone 3 or zone 4. Like, that's a sign that your body is having to work really hard to put out what should be pretty standard power for you. Now, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but that's just a little bit of a knowledge tip. Here's how I like to build out heart rate zones. So I like to take basically the 20-minute peak average from those bike and run tests. So I will look into Training Peaks, I will hit 20-minute peak, I will find that number, and then I plug them in to this Andy Coggan profile. So same idea, 5 zones, very simple. Let's check in on how these are working. Let's just say, for example, maybe your 20-minute peak on the bike was 155, boom. So now all of a sudden we know that on the bike, these are exactly where our heart rate zones are. Now, very often I will see athletes, especially newer athletes, their bike heart rate is struggling to get up to what their run heart rate is. there's usually about a 10 beat gap. And what that is a sign of is that that athlete needs better mechanics and better technical development on the bike so that their body can actually tap into the full muscular potential that they've got. But we don't need to like rush that process. That will be happening over time as you develop an endurance. And so we are totally okay to have separate and different bike heart rate and run heart rate zones. Now let's just check in on this profile. Boom. Calculator's working well. Here we go. That shows you exactly how to execute. And so again, the idea is that, hey, you got a zone 2 run. Let's say you do the zone 2 run. Your heart rate average is, maybe it's 134. Sweet. You check back over to the pacing. Maybe you ran at 134 average beats per minute and 830 pace. That would be great. If you ran 830 pace and your heart rate is 145, well, that might be a sign that you're dehydrated. Maybe you're really low on sleep. Maybe your body's low on some other type of nutrient or fuel source or whatever. And these are the ways that we can start to understand how our body is actually developing and how we're performing in these types of endurance training sessions and eventually races. Now, let me go ahead and jump over to Training Peaks. Boom. And I got an athlete, Jason Parker. He just did a recent threshold test on the bike. So let me go ahead and show you exactly what this looks like when I go ahead and set athlete zones inside of Training Peaks. So threshold test, I click into it. First thing that's a great sign is I see that he's got 12 peak performances. So he really pushed himself in this test. We had seen in his training that his harder sessions were not feeling as hard as he thought that they should. And so to me, that was a sign of, hey, you've been training inside a tribal for 4 or 5 months. You've been getting stronger, and it's time to retest, and it's time to check out where those zones are. This kind of gives like a little overview of the peak performances, but I click into Analyze here. Let's get this guy moved up. Click into Peak Power, and Jason had a bunch of peaks, and I click in here to this 30-minute peak. And so he was 255, which was sweet because that set up his zones. I think that off the top of my head, that means that his FTP, right, you multiply it by 0.95. It was somewhere around 242, I think. I'll check in a second. But his previous FTP from when he started early in training was like 220. And so it was like, sweet, we saw what, a freaking 10% boost. That's awesome. So that would be number one, is that 255. And then we also want to check in on bike heart rate. So right there, boom, we can just clearly pull that, and that is 171. Awesome. Now, when I go into his profile, let's see where he's at here. Jason Parker. Zones, edit. So we went here, and I've already updated these, but I plug this in, 245, that was the number off of the 252 or 255 or whatever it was. Threshold power is what we're using. We use the Andy Coggan method, and then I basically just calculate that, and that sets these zones. So if we check back over, let's just compare that these are the same. So we have 245 threshold, and then this zone 2 is 137 to 185. So 245, let's make sure this is right, 245, boom, 137 to 183, 137 to 185. So with the decimals, these are a fraction off, but that doesn't really make much of a difference to me. And then for this athlete, right, Jason, when he goes into his bike workouts, he will see these exact zones mapped out. And if he's got a trainer ride that's programmed with erg mode or something like that, he's guided based off of these zones. And so again, it's all based off of having that FTP being accurate and then applying it like this. Same principle would apply for the threshold heart rate. I'm not going to edit these. I think that that's right, though, based off of the previous thing. But we'll get back over to the calculator. And so, again, for you, like all of that's going on in the back end of your training plan, but for you to understand, right, where's this all coming together? How's it fitting out? How do I want to execute? I really hope that this is valuable and helpful for you. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here. Peace.